Part 2 of Chapter 15 will deal with cognitive functioning in older adults. And we will begin by looking at attention. Um, the concept of multidimensionality is that your cognitive abilities have many dimensions. So, I mean, it's made up of attention, it's made up of different types of memory, different types of attention, executive function, etc. So, cognition is not just one thing, but it's actually made up of many different parts. Multidirectionality is that some of these different parts of your cognition will decline, others may remain stable, or even show improvement in your late adult years. So this is why we have this heading of multidimensionality and multidirectionality. Many different parts make up your cognition. Some improve, some decline, some are maintained. Let's look at some of these different parts that make up cognition. So we will begin with attention. Older adults are less able to ignore distracting information. So their selective attention it shows a decline. And if you remember, we looked at selective versus sustained attention all the way back very early in childhood. We talked about how preschoolers did not have very good selective attention. They had trouble focusing on the relevant aspects of an experience while ignoring the distracting, non-relevant aspects. And so it's kind of like we come full circle. I mean, it was a weakness very early in life that we did not have, that we had trouble selecting what to pay attention to. And it comes again late in adulthood that we get distracted more easily. We have more trouble picking out what's important in the environment to focus on. Um, so it generally decreases in older adults, selective attention. But with sustained attention, we get different pictures. Sustained attention is holding your attention on one thing, and we find that older adults perform just as well as middle-aged and younger adults at sustained attention. Think, for instance, of a grandma in a quiet house. She may sit knitting for hours and hours. I mean, that is an example of sustained attention, holding your attention on one task for a matter of hours. And so when when there are fewer distractions, older adults can do this long-term sustained attention. Memory. Well, first of all, there's a distinction between explicit versus implicit memory. Explicit memory are it's the what would be considered the conscious part of your memory. You know, if you kind of purposely look into your memory to try and recall something, then you're using explicit memory. Just off the top of my head, one example might be, I don't know, you're summarizing a movie to a friend. I mean, you saw the movie some time ago and you're relaying the plot to somebody. So you'd be explicitly looking into your memory to recall the movie and the plot as you tell it to your friend. Overall, explicit memory declines as a person ages, but there are different parts that make up your conscious explicit memory. We can talk about episodic and semantic memory as being two parts of explicit memory. Episodic memory refers to retention of information about the where and when of life's happenings. It is remembering the episodes of your life. You know, where was I last week when I met my wife for lunch? I mean, where did we have lunch? Where was my birthday party when I was 10 years old? What was that trip I went on in my 20s? I mean, so when you think back to personal experiences that you were involved with, and you have memories of where you are kind of, thinking about what you heard, what you saw at the time, these are episodic memories. Um, Younger adults have better episodic memory than older adults do. And so we certainly do see declines in the ability to recall episodic memories. Semantic memory is the memory for knowledge and facts, the information you've accumulated during your life. Uh, these are independent types of memory, episodic and semantic. And we know this because you can remember facts without remembering when you learned them, or where you were when you learned them. So, you know, I can recall that the first president of the United States was George Washington, but I have no idea when or where I learned this. I'm not remembering an episode. So, facts are not connected to the episodes that where you learn them. And so they're certainly two very different types of memories. So during an episode of your life, you actually store each type of memory separately. What facts have you just learned, or what knowledge have you just gained, as well as storing the episode itself, remembering what you were wearing that day and who you were with, and the details. What we find is that semantic memory holds up longer than episodic memory, excuse me. So this is why you remember many facts without remembering the details of when and how you learned them and who taught them to you, because those parts have faded, but the facts have remained. So semantic memory is more enduring. Um, Older adults often take longer to retrieve semantic information, but they can ultimately retrieve them or retrieve it. So even though it takes longer, and once again, I've talked before about how brain processing speed does slow down as we get older, but the information's still there, and can still be accessed. Um, what specifically declines the most in semantic memory is the ability to retrieve very specific information, such as a person's name, for instance, where it's, that may be sometimes harder for older adults, and that if the memory does fail, it'll be something like a very specific detail. It won't be forgetting, you know, I don't know, if they like a whole area, like forgetting what all the different states names, or I don't know, or the history. If they knew about the history of the United States, they're not going to forget it all. They might forget, an individual president's name, but they'll remember the whole event very well. Okay, so overall, episodic memory certainly declines more than semantic memory. And then we have implicit memory. And we think of this as kind of unconscious memory. It's memory that you rely on without consciously seeking it. So examples of implicit memory would be something like driving a car. Once you become skilled at driving a car, you don't really think about all the steps anymore. You just do them. You get in your car, you want to go somewhere, your hands move, your feet move. I mean, you drive somewhere. You don't sit there and think, okay, I got to press on this pedal. I've got to move. Put it into this gear. I've got to, I have to hit the turn signal this way in order to signal left turn. I mean, like, all these things become very automatic. This is what implicit memory is like. Riding a bicycle, knowing how to ride a bicycle is an implicit memory. And so you just do it. It's like muscle memory. Typing on a keyboard is a type of implicit memory. Once you become skilled at it, you don't think about it anymore. You don't think about where the keys are. Your fingers just move, and you can type without thinking about it. So implicit memories are unconscious type memories, involve skills and routine procedures that are automatically performed. These types of memories are less likely to be adversely affected by aging compared to explicit memory. And finally, we have working memory and perceptual speed. Um, these are cognitive resource mechanisms that decline as a person ages. Um, when we talk about information processing, the theory of information processing, these are kind of the two pillars of information processing. Working memory is, how much information can you think about at one time in your short-term memory and manipulate. And perceptual speed is about how fast your brain processes information. The speed of your nervous system. And these are the two things that improve during childhood to make us smarter year after year and to improve our cognitive abilities. Our working memory gets larger early in life. Our brains speed up. When we get towards the end of life, we get the opposite going on. Our brains start to slow down. The perceptual speed of your brain shows considerable decline. And as an example, think about an older adult trying to quickly step on their brakes when the car ahead of them stops. So reaction time. Reaction time is an indicator of the perceptual speed of your brain. And older adults, we certainly see a decline in reaction time. And this shows that their brain or their overall nervous system is slowing down. As your perceptual speed of your brain slows down, this affects your working memory. The two are very strongly linked. Having a slower brain leads you to being able to process less information at one time in your working memory. So you cannot manipulate as much information. Meaning that, if you can hold less information at one time and manipulate it, that will decrease your logical abilities. Okay, I'm going to go on here. Executive functioning. I've talked about this many times before in the course. These are aspects of working memory that end up declining in older adults. Let me say that different way. Let me just say, okay, executive function. First of all, it involves managing your thoughts in order to engage in goal-directed behavior and to exercise self-control. So you use your executive function to plan, to make goals, to engage in following a goal. What step do I do now? It's like your control center of your brain. It also allows you to exercise self-control. It is where you have impulse control. So I don't actually want to get into these specific points about what's declining. But I'll just say that older adults have less effective cognitive control than when they were younger. So there is certainly a reduction in executive functioning as we get older. But there is considerable variability among older adults. Some show much greater declines than others. Part of the reason is the use it or lose it idea. Plenty of evidence shows that when we continue to do mental activities throughout our middle and later adult years, that we can keep our declines of cognitive functioning to a minimum. If you continue to use and exercise your cognition, you slow down the normal decreases that take place. Um, some examples are mentioned here: reading books, doing crossword puzzles, going to lectures and concerts. So we can slow down the decline. Other adults that do not engage in these cognitive activities will tend to show greater declines in their cognitive abilities. They will lose their cognitive abilities much quicker. Exercise also affects this. Physical exercise is related to your cognitive functioning. So it's not just doing mental activities, but also keeping physically healthy. The area of cognitive neuroscience um, relies on brain imaging techniques in order to study the links between your brain and your cognitive functioning. So they use MRI scans, PET scans, um, diffusion tensor imaging is another technique, and they want to see, what are the physical changes taking place and how they relate to mental changes that take place. And certainly, in the science we have found that change. This last point here: changes in the brain can influence cognitive functioning. So if your brain changes physically, it's going to affect how you think. But then the opposite's also true. Changes in cognitive functioning can influence the brain. So, changes in how you think and what you think about and how much you use it. Once again, this is the user or loser idea. How much you're using your brain. This will affect the physical changes in your brain. So, um, what this suggests is that it's not a one-way street. I mean, it's not that you're going to show deterioration physically in your brain later, and this will cause your cognitive functioning to decline. You can slow the physical changes down by continuing to use your brain. Um, those that continue to engage in high-level cognitive activities show reduced mortality. You actually live longer if you keep using your brain, and onset of memory loss is delayed. You're less likely to show memory loss symptoms. Some of the findings concerning this area come from that wonderful nun study that I described earlier. In some cases, you will see rapid cognitive declines in an older individual because they suffer from some form of dementia. So dementia is a neurological disorder in which primary symptoms involve deterioration of mental functioning. It is not a normal condition at all. We do not experience dementia just because we get older. You experience dementia because you have a particular disorder, such as perhaps Parkinson's or Alzheimer's. Okay, I'm going to go on. One example of dementia is Alzheimer's. This causes gradual deterioration of memory, reasoning, language, and eventually physical function. So you can see there's a wide range of symptomology areas that it affects. You can read some of these points on your own. Women are more likely to develop it just simply because they live longer. Okay. And also you read about the specifics of what happens in the brain with Alzheimer's. You can read about that in the book. What I want to talk about here is what reduces or increases the risk of Alzheimer's, and a few of the factors they found that reduce your risk are as follows. There are certain medical exposures. For instance, estrogen, the introduction of estrogen can help delay Alzheimer's and reduce the risk of it. Dietary factors, certain dietary factors. One that they found that influences it is coffee use. So engaging in moderate coffee use helps to delay Alzheimer's. Cognitive activity, certainly, once again, the use it or lose it idea. If you continue to use your brain, you can actually push back the onset of Alzheimer's if you're destined to get it at some point, and you can reduce your risk of it. Low to moderate alcohol use is also associated with a reduced risk of Alzheimer's. So there are various factors that help reduce the risk. What helps increase the risk of Alzheimer's are things that aren't surprising, like certain mental illnesses such as depression make Alzheimer's more likely. Hypertension is actually associated with increased Alzheimer's risk, as well as having a family history of Alzheimer's. And that is where I'm going to leave off on chapter 15. That will conclude our coverage of the physical and cognitive development in late adulthood.